My wife's betrayal cut deep as I stood frozen in our kitchen doorway, hearing her ask my best friend Mark to be our daughter's godfather. Their affair was reborn right before my eyes, all my suspicions suddenly confirmed in one devastating moment. I'd been blind for months, but now I saw everything with perfect clarity. The lingering touches, the inside jokes, the late nights at work. The foundation of our marriage crumbled as I watched them share a tender kiss over my daughter's crib, unaware of my presence. "He would never suspect," she whispered, her voice carrying easily in our open-concept home. "And it would give you a permanent place in Lily's life, no matter what happens between us." The coffee I'd been holding slipped from my grasp, splattering across the hardwood floor. The bitter aroma filled the air as they jumped apart, guilt etched across their faces. The scalding liquid soaked through my socks, but I barely registered the burning sensation against my skin. "James," Rebecca stammered, her face draining of color. "I was just asking Mark about being Lily's godfather. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" I stared at her, at the woman I'd loved for 8 years, wondering how she could stand there, pretending nothing was wrong. My chest constricted painfully as I struggled to breathe. Behind her, Mark wouldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor as he edged toward the door. "How long?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm despite the storm raging inside me. "What are you talking about?" She attempted a confused laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Don't," I warned, my voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "Don't insult me by pretending—" Mark muttered something about needing to leave, but I blocked the doorway. "Answer me. How long has this been going on?" Rebecca's facade crumbled. 6 months, she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But James, it just happened. We didn't mean to hurt you." 6 months. Half a year of lies. My daughter was only 4 months old. The realization that their affair predated Lily's birth hit me like a physical blow. My knees weakened, forcing me to grip the counter for support. "Get out," I told Mark, my voice deadly quiet. "If you value the 20 years of friendship we've had, get out now before I do something we'll both regret." He fled without another word, the front door slamming behind him. The sound echoed through our home like a gunshot, leaving a terrible silence in its wake. On the stove, the coffee pot continued to heat, the liquid inside now burning and filling the kitchen with an acrid smell that stung my nostrils. It seemed oddly fitting. Everything in my life was going up in flames. "James, we need to talk about this rationally," Rebecca said, collecting herself. "What you overheard, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I challenged. "Because it sounded like you were asking my best friend, the man you've been sleeping with behind my back, to be our daughter's godfather." "Mark would be perfect for Lily," she insisted, switching tactics. "He's successful, responsible, and he cares about her." "He cares about her?" I echoed incredulously. "He's been sleeping with her mother while her father worked 60-hour weeks to support this family." Rebecca's eyes hardened. "You want to talk about who's been there? Where were you during my pregnancy when I was throwing up every morning? Half the time you were at work, and the other half you were passed out from exhaustion. Because I was working to buy this house. To pay for the nursery you insisted had to be perfect." The unfairness of her accusation staggered me. "And what about before that?" she pressed, stepping closer. "The 2 years you were emotionally absent because of your father's death. Who comforted me when I miscarried our first baby while you drowned yourself in work?" I flinched at the low blow. The memories of that dark period flooded back. My grief, my withdrawal, my failure to support her through our loss. Guilt nibbled at the edges of my anger. "You owe me this, James," she said, softening her voice. "After everything we've been through, you owe me the right to choose our daughter's godfather." I stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. This manipulative stranger wearing my wife's face. Something shifted inside me, a quiet resolve taking root. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my tone deliberately neutral. I even managed a small nod, as if considering her request. I watched relief wash over her face, saw her shoulders relax as she believed she'd won. She didn't notice my fingers curling into a fist behind my back, nails digging crescents into my palm. She didn't see the quiet determination settling into my bones. She thought she knew me well enough to manipulate me, but she'd forgotten one crucial fact. I'd never been a vengeful person because I'd never had reason to be. Until now. Later that night, as Rebecca slept beside me, or pretended to, I stared at the ceiling, remembering all the signs I'd missed. The sudden password changes on her phone. The new lingerie I never saw. The girls' nights that left her smelling of unfamiliar cologne. The hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I thought about the baptism, now just 3 weeks away. Family would be flying in from across the country. Arrangements had been made, invitations sent. I had precious little time to decide what to do, how to respond to this betrayal without harming my innocent daughter in the process. As if sensing my thoughts, Lily whimpered through the baby monitor. I slipped out of bed, padding down the hallway to her nursery. Her tiny face scrunched in sleep, perfect rosebud lips pursed as she dreamed. I gently stroked her cheek with one finger, marveling at the softness of her skin. "I'll protect you," I whispered fiercely, "no matter what." The baptism clock was ticking, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. "James, you remember Mark?" Rebecca said unnecessarily, as if we were meeting for the first time rather than having been best friends since college. I thought it would be nice for the three of us to have dinner together to discuss the baptism. I nodded, extending my hand to the man who'd betrayed me. "Of course. Nice to see you, Mark." His handshake was clammy, his eyes darting nervously around our dining room. Good. Let him be uncomfortable. "I've made lasagna," Rebecca announced, too brightly. "Your favorite, James." "How thoughtful," I replied, pulling out her chair, playing the dutiful husband while scanning them both for details they might have missed in their rush to appear normal. There it was, the small silver bracelet on Mark's wrist, a match to the one Rebecca had started wearing 2 months ago. For my birthday, she'd claimed, though her birthday was still months away. I'd been too tired, too trusting to question it. Throughout dinner, I watched them try to maintain the charade. The careful distance they kept, the overthought conversations, the way they never quite looked directly at each other. All while Rebecca extolled Mark's virtues as a potential godfather. "He's already setting up a college fund for Lily," she gushed. "Isn't that generous?" I forked a bite of lasagna into my mouth, nodding appreciatively. "Very generous. Where did the initial funds come from, Mark? That new architectural contract you landed, or somewhere else?" A flicker of panic crossed Rebecca's face. Mark coughed, reaching for his water. "Just putting a little aside each month," he mumbled. I smiled pleasantly. Admirable. After dinner, while Rebecca prepared coffee, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I silently slipped into our bedroom and went straight to Rebecca's purse, the designer one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she guarded carefully these days. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it, the leather supple under my hands. Inside, nestled beneath her wallet, I found a hotel receipt. The Four Seasons, dated just 3 days ago. A $450 charge for a room I hadn't paid for, hadn't stayed in. The paper carried a faint trace of perfume, not Rebecca's usual scent, but something she'd apparently worn specially for him. My stomach lurched, but I continued searching. Beneath the receipt was her checkbook. I flipped through it, finding withdrawals, large ones, from our joint account. $500 here, $1,000 there. Money we'd saved for Lily's future, for our retirement, systematically drained over the past 6 months. I photographed everything with shaking hands, then carefully replaced it all exactly as I'd found it. When I returned to the dining room, Rebecca was laughing at something Mark had said, her head thrown back in genuine delight, a laugh I hadn't heard in months. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing my expression. "Perfect," I lied, accepting the coffee she offered. "Just checking on Lily." The next morning, while Rebecca took Lily to her mother's house, I visited our bank. The manager, Paula, had handled our accounts for years. "I'd like to adjust our account settings," I explained, sliding my ID across her desk. "Of course, Mr. Carter. What changes did you have in mind?" "I need to create a separate account for my daughter's future," I said. "And I'd like to require dual authorization for any withdrawals exceeding $200 from our joint account." Paula's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "That's certainly possible. Mrs. Carter will need to sign the paperwork as well for the joint account changes." I smiled. "Actually, I'd like to open a new account entirely in my name for Lily. We can transfer funds from the joint account today with my authorization, and then simply implement the dual authorization rule on what remains." As Paula processed my request, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a flicker of control returning. I was protecting my daughter's future. I was reclaiming some small piece of what had been stolen from me. I left the bank feeling liberated, emboldened by this first concrete step. The sunshine seemed brighter somehow, the spring air sweeter in my lungs. I was no longer just a victim. I was fighting back. That weekend, Rebecca's parents hosted a family dinner to celebrate Lily's upcoming baptism. Mark was there, of course, playing the role of devoted family friend. I watched him charm Rebecca's parents, already positioning himself as part of the family. As dessert was served, Rebecca's father raised his glass. "To Mark, who will guide our precious granddaughter through life as her godfather." Before Rebecca could stop me, I stood, raising my own glass. And who better than Mark, a man of such interesting history? Rebecca stiffened beside me. "James, did you know," I continued conversationally, addressing the table at large, "that Mark was asked to leave his previous architectural firm? Something about funds going missing from client accounts?" A hush fell over the table. Mark's face drained of color. "That's not true," he stammered. "I left to start my own practice." "Really? That's not what Daniel Pierce told me when I ran into him last week. Daniel was on the board, wasn't he, Mark? Had to cover up the whole thing to avoid scandal?" Rebecca's mother gasped softly. Her father's brow furrowed in concern. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," Rebecca interjected desperately. "Mark is a respected professional." "Of course," I agreed smoothly. "I'm just surprised he never mentioned it. After all, there shouldn't be secrets between family, right?" The remainder of the evening was tense, with Mark leaving early and Rebecca barely speaking to me. Once we were home and Lily was asleep, the storm broke. "How dare you?" Rebecca hissed, pacing our bedroom. "You humiliated Mark in front of my entire family." "I simply shared information I thought relevant about the man who wants to be responsible for our daughter's moral guidance," I replied calmly, removing my tie. "You had no right. You promised you would consider him." "I did consider him. I found him wanting." Rebecca's face contorted with fury. "This isn't about Lily at all, is it? This is about your ego, your pride." I stopped, turning to face her fully. "No, Rebecca, this is about trust. This is about character. Can you honestly say that man has either? More than you do right now, she spat. At least he's been there for me. While betraying me, I pointed out. What kind of moral example is that for our daughter? Rebecca's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. Fine. If that's how you want to play this, I'll take Lily and go stay with my mother until the baptism. Maybe by then you'll have come to your senses. Fear lanced through me. You're not taking my daughter anywhere. Watch me, she challenged. Who do you think a court would favor? The devoted mother or the workaholic father having a mental breakdown? I stared at her, stunned by the threat. Is that what this has come to? Using our child as a weapon? You started this war, she replied coldly. I'm just finishing it. I lay awake that night, listening to Rebecca's even breathing beside me, wondering if she would really take Lily away. The thought was unbearable. What rights did I have? What would happen in a custody battle? The questions swirled endlessly, leaving me exhausted and terrified by morning. The next betrayal blindsided me completely. I was having lunch with my mother when she brought it up. Rebecca called me yesterday, she said hesitantly, stirring her tea. The spoon clinked rhythmically against fine china, a sound that had always soothed me as a child, but now set my teeth on edge. She's worried about you, James. I set down my sandwich. Worried about me? Why? My mother's concerned gaze met mine. She says you've been having angry outbursts, that you're becoming paranoid, making accusations. She mentioned you haven't been sleeping, that you're obsessed with who will be Lily's godfather. The blood rushed to my face. And you believed her? I don't know what to believe, my mother admitted. You haven't been yourself lately. You look exhausted. You've lost weight. And now this fixation on the baptism. Mom, I interrupted, leaning forward. Rebecca is having an affair with Mark. Has been for at least 6 months. They want him to be Lily's godfather to cement his place in her life. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, James, are you certain? I heard them discussing it. Found hotel receipts, saw messages on her phone. She's been stealing money from our accounts to fund their little rendezvous. My voice shook slightly. And now she's trying to convince my family I'm having some sort of breakdown. The voicemail I received that evening confirmed it wasn't just my mother. Rebecca had been methodically contacting everyone in my family, planting seeds of doubt about my mental state. My sister's message was filled with gentle concern, suggesting I get help before the baptism. My uncle wondered if I was under too much stress at work. I sat in my car outside our house, listening to message after message, each one a fresh wound. The familiar scent of the leather seats I'd once found comforting now felt suffocating. Rain pattered against the windshield, distorting the view of the home I'd worked so hard to provide. When I finally went inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I found Rebecca in Lily's nursery, whispering softly to our daughter as she rocked her. "Where have you been?" she asked, not looking up. "Dinner with my mother," I replied. "Interesting conversation. Seems she's quite worried about my mental health." Rebecca's shoulders tensed, but she continued rocking Lily. "Someone needs to be concerned. You're not yourself." "Actually, I'm more myself than I've been in a long time," I countered, clear-headed enough to see exactly what you're doing. She finally met my gaze, defiance in her eyes. "And what's that?" "Trying to isolate me. Make me look unstable so when you take Lily, no one questions it." Rebecca carefully laid our now sleeping daughter in her crib. "Let's talk in the other room. I don't want to wake her." In the hallway, she rounded on me. "You're proving my point with these paranoid accusations." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the call log. "You called my entire family. What exactly did you tell my sister that made her think I need psychiatric help?" Rebecca's expression hardened. Only what she needed to hear. You're clearly not thinking rationally about this baptism situation. This isn't about the baptism. I struggled to keep my voice down. This is about you and Mark betraying me, stealing from me, and now trying to manipulate my family against me. Mark and I are planning a life together, she admitted finally, chin raised defiantly. We love each other. After the baptism, we're moving to Boston for his new job. Lily comes with me, of course. The casual way she announced the destruction of our family left me speechless. Boston, across the country from our home in California. From my family, my support system. You're not taking my daughter anywhere, I managed finally. Rebecca smiled, the expression chilling in its confidence. I think you'll find I can. I've been documenting your erratic behavior for weeks. Your family is already concerned. Your outburst at dinner the other night was witnessed by my parents. And now I have this conversation recorded as well, showing your anger issues. She pulled her phone from her pocket, the screen showing an active recording. I've also taken the liberty of consulting a lawyer, she continued. Given your work schedule and deteriorating mental state, my case for full custody is quite strong. I stared at this stranger, wearing my wife's face, wondering how I could have missed the coldness that had always lurked beneath her beauty. In that moment, I glimpsed what my future would be, fighting for scraps of time with my daughter, portrayed as an unstable workaholic, while Mark played father to my child. Something inside me hardened, a quiet resolve crystallizing. I wouldn't give Rebecca the satisfaction of another outburst to record. Instead, I nodded slowly. I see, I said quietly. If you'll excuse me, I need some air. I spent the night in a hotel, not trusting myself to remain under the same roof with her. Not yet. I needed to think, to plan. In the sterile hotel room, I spread out all the evidence I'd collected. Photos of receipts, bank statements showing suspicious withdrawals, screenshots of text messages I'd found on Rebecca's iPad that she'd forgotten to delete. It was damning, but would it be enough? Rebecca had been playing a longer game than I realized, systematically undermining my credibility with those whose support I'd need most. The next morning, I called an old college friend who had become a family law attorney. David, I said when he answered, I need your help. I laid out everything, my voice steady despite the humiliation of admitting how thoroughly I'd been deceived. David listened without interruption, then sighed heavily. This is messy, James. Really messy. But you've done the right thing collecting evidence. Don't confront her again without me present. And whatever you do, don't leave the house. Abandonment won't look good if this goes to court. She's planning to take Lily to Boston after the baptism, I told him. She can't legally take your daughter out of state without your consent or a court order, David assured me. But we need to move quickly. I'm going to file for an emergency custody order today, just to establish groundwork. That evening, Rebecca announced that she'd planned a special pre-baptism dinner for the following night. Just family and the godparents, she said. My sister will be Lily's godmother, of course, and Mark. Of course, I echoed, pretending indifference. Her surprise at my apparent acquiescence was visible. You're okay with it now? I shrugged. You made your position clear. I'm trying to be reasonable. Relief washed over her face. Too easily. Too completely. She believed I'd given up. The pre-baptism dinner was an exercise in restraint. I smiled at the right moments, made appropriate small talk, all while watching Rebecca and Mark exchange secret glances across the table. Rebecca's sister, Diane, oblivious to the undercurrents, chatted excitedly about her role as godmother. And Mark, Rebecca's father said, raising his glass again, we're so pleased to officially welcome you to the family as Lily's godfather. James, would you like to say a few words? All eyes turned to me, Rebecca's filled with warning. I stood slowly, taking my time lifting my glass. I'm a man of tradition, I began. And tradition says a godfather should be someone of moral character, someone who demonstrates loyalty and integrity. I paused, looking directly at Mark. Someone who puts the child's well-being above their own desires. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca's knuckles whitened around her water glass. "Two traditions," I concluded, "and to those who honor them." As I sat, I casually squeezed a lemon wedge into Rebecca's water glass, knowing her mild citrus allergy would cause just enough discomfort to disrupt her evening. A petty move, perhaps, but satisfying nonetheless. Later, as guests were leaving, I overheard Mark and Rebecca in the kitchen. "Everything's arranged," Mark was saying. "The movers come 2 days after the baptism. My place in Boston is ready." "What about James?" Rebecca asked. "Once the baptism is done and I'm officially part of Lily's life, he'll have to accept the reality. The custody agreement your lawyer drafted gives him visitation, but we'll have primary custody. He works too much to fight it effectively." I slipped away silently, fury coiling tight in my chest. They were so confident, so certain of their victory. The baptism was now just 48 hours away. The clock was ticking, but for once, I was ready. Few people knew about my family's wealth. I'd worked hard to make my own way, refusing the easy path my father had offered in the family business. When I met Rebecca, I was living in a modest apartment, driving a used car, determined to build something of my own. She assumed I came from a middle-class background, and I never corrected her. The truth was, the Carters had been influential in San Francisco for 3 generations. My grandfather had built a shipping empire, my father had expanded into real estate, and though I'd chosen architecture instead, the family connections remained intact. Rebecca had never questioned why we were able to afford our beautiful home on my architect's salary alone. She'd never wondered how I'd paid for her extravagant engagement ring or our honeymoon in the Maldives. She'd been too delighted by the lifestyle to examine its source. Now, standing in my grandfather's study, I finally called in the family connections I'd avoided for so long. "I need your help, grandfather," I said simply. Edward Carter, at 82, remained an imposing figure. His white hair was still thick, his blue eyes, so like my own, sharp with intelligence. He sat behind his massive oak desk, fingers steepled as I explained my situation. The rich scent of polished wood and leather-bound books filled the air, a smell that had defined my childhood. The familiar environment steadied me as I laid out Rebecca's betrayal, Mark's involvement, and their plans for my daughter. "And the baptism is Sunday?" he confirmed, expression grave. "Yes, at St. Mark's Cathedral." My grandfather nodded thoughtfully. "Bishop Sullivan still oversees the cathedral. We've served on several charitable boards together." He picked up his phone. "Eleanor, please get Bishop Sullivan on the line. Tell him it's regarding my great-granddaughter's baptism." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, grandfather." He waved away my gratitude. "Family protects family, James. Always. Your father would be handling this himself if he were still with us." While my grandfather spoke with the bishop, I used his private office to call my cousin Stephen, who had taken over the family's legal team after my father's death. "I need everything you can get on Mark Brennan," I told him, "especially any other affairs, financial improprieties, professional misconduct." "Consider it done," Stephen replied. "And Rebecca?" I hesitated. Despite everything, some part of me still hesitated to destroy the mother of my child. "Just focus on Mark for now," I decided, "and I need it by tomorrow evening." Back at home, I discovered another betrayal. Rebecca had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, a rare carelessness that proved fortunate. The screen showed a changed invitation for Lily's baptism, moved from Sunday afternoon to Sunday morning, a full 3 hours earlier than originally planned. I scrolled through her email, finding messages to guests informing them of the slight time adjustment due to the church's scheduling. Everyone had been notified except me and my family. They were planning to conduct the baptism before I arrived, presenting me with a fait accompli. I photographed the evidence, then carefully closed the laptop, leaving everything exactly as I'd found it. That night, as Rebecca slept, I made my final preparations. I forwarded all the evidence I'd collected to David and Stephen, along with a detailed timeline of events. I downloaded the recording app Rebecca had been using against me, determined to capture any damning admissions she might make. In Lily's nursery, I stood watching my daughter sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically. Her eyelashes fluttered against her cheeks as she dreamed, one small fist curled near her face. Love and protectiveness surged through me with almost painful intensity. "I promise you'll never doubt who fought for you," I whispered, "who loved you enough to stand against everyone." The next evening, as Rebecca prepared for the baptism the following day, my phone chimed with a message from Stephen. The attached file was simply labeled Brennan Complete. I opened it with trembling fingers, scanning the contents rapidly. Mark's history was far worse than I'd imagined. 3 previous affairs with married women, a hushed-up sexual harassment claim at his former firm, gambling debts that explained his interest in our savings, and evidence he'd been working with a competitor while still employed at my architectural firm. It was everything I needed and more. Stephen had even prepared a concise visual presentation that could be displayed with the click of a button, devastating in its simplicity and irrefutable in its documentation. I slept peacefully that night for the first time in weeks, secure in the knowledge that I had reclaimed control. Rebecca might have been playing chess, but she didn't realize I'd changed the game entirely. Morning arrived bright and clear, perfect weather for a baptism. I dressed carefully in my best suit, checking my appearance one last time before going to prepare Lily. Rebecca was already in the nursery, dressing our daughter in the christening gown that had been in my family for generations. "Don't forget we need to leave by 9:30, she reminded me, not looking up from buttoning the delicate gown. "The ceremony starts at 10 o'clock sharp." "Of course," I agreed mildly. "Wouldn't want to be late for our own daughter's baptism." Rebecca's hand stilled momentarily, perhaps surprised by my continued compliance, before she resumed dressing Lily. At precisely 9:15, I received a text from my grandfather. "Everything is in place. We await your arrival." I smiled, tucking my phone away. "Ready to go?" I asked Rebecca. She nodded, lifting Lily carefully. "Mark is meeting us there." "I'm sure he is," I replied, holding the door open for them. As we drove to the cathedral, Rebecca grew increasingly tense, checking her phone repeatedly. "You seem anxious," I observed. "Just excited," she lied. "It's an important day." "The most important," I agreed. "A day no one will forget." When we arrived at St. Mark's Cathedral, Rebecca's step faltered at the sight of the cars already parked outside. My grandfather's distinctive Bentley, my mother's Mercedes, cars belonging to uncles, aunts, and cousins I hadn't seen in months. "What are they all doing here so early?" she asked, voice tight. "I invited them," I replied simply. "It's a family celebration, after all." Inside the cathedral, my family filled the first 3 rows. Bishop Sullivan, in his formal robes, stood waiting at the altar. Rebecca's parents and sister looked confused, huddled together near the front. Of Mark, there was no sign. "James," Rebecca hissed, grabbing my arm. "What have you done? Where's Mark?" "I imagine he's running late," I said. "But we shouldn't keep everyone waiting. Bishop Sullivan has a busy schedule." Before she could protest further, my mother approached, arms outstretched for Lily. "Let me take her, dear. The godparents should be getting ready. Godparents? Rebecca echoed, bewildered. But Diane and Mark. Oh, didn't James tell you? My mother's voice was honey-sweet with false innocence. There's been a slight change of plans. St. Mark's Cathedral soared above us, its stained glass windows casting kaleidoscope patterns across the marble floor. The scent of incense hung heavy in the air, mingling with the fragrance of white lilies arranged at the altar. Candles flickered in their stands, lending a timeless quality to the ancient ceremony about to unfold. Rebecca stood frozen as I took Lily from her arms and handed her to my mother. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice rising. "We agreed Mark would be—" "Actually," I interrupted calmly, "I never agreed to anything." I gestured toward Bishop Sullivan, who nodded solemnly. The bishop was kind enough to accommodate our family's traditional baptism time. Traditional? Her eyes darted around the cathedral, taking in my assembled family, the absence of Mark, the controlled environment that had slipped entirely from her grasp. "James, you can't do this. Not without Mark." "Mark won't be joining us," I informed her. "He's currently having a rather uncomfortable conversation with the partners at my firm about professional ethics." Rebecca's face paled. "You can't just change everything without telling me. I'm her mother." "And I'm her father," I replied, voice hardening. "A fact you and Mark seemed determined to diminish, not today." As if on cue, the cathedral doors flew open and Mark burst in, disheveled and frantic. "Rebecca," he called. "They're trying to—" Two security guards, arranged by my grandfather, intercepted him smoothly, guiding him firmly to a back pew away from the main congregation. "This is outrageous," Rebecca sputtered. "My parents, tell them—" But her parents remained seated, confusion and growing concern evident on their faces. Her father half rose, then subsided at a quelling look from my grandfather. "The baptism proceeds as planned," Bishop Sullivan announced, his authoritative voice echoing through the cathedral. "With godparents chosen by the Carter family, as is their right and tradition." Rebecca lunged toward me, but my Aunt Catherine stepped between us, taking her arm in a deceptively gentle grip. "Let's not make a scene in God's house, dear," she murmured. "Think of little Lily." I proceeded to the altar, where my cousin Michael and his wife Eliza waited as the chosen godparents, respected pediatric surgeons both, with 3 children of their own and impeccable reputations in the community. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its timeless simplicity. Bishop Sullivan's voice rang out clear and strong as he performed the ancient rite. I held Lily carefully as holy water was sprinkled on her forehead. She remained peaceful throughout, as if sensing the importance of the moment. From the corner of my eye, I could see Rebecca, restrained by Catherine's presence, tears of fury streaming down her face. Mark strained against the subtle but effective blockade of the security guards, his expression thunderous. As the baptism concluded, I handed Lily to Michael, who accepted his role as godfather with appropriate solemnity. Bishop Sullivan presented the baptismal certificate, signed and witnessed, legally binding and incontestable. "Now," Bishop Sullivan announced to the congregation, "let us proceed to the parish hall for a celebration of this blessed event." As guests began filing out, I approached Mark, who had finally been released by the security guards. "I think it's best if you leave," I told him quietly. "You self-righteous bastard," he snarled. "You think this changes anything? Rebecca and I—" "Should know what you're getting into," I interrupted, nodding to Stephen, who stood nearby with a tablet in hand. With a single tap, Stephen activated the projector system installed in the cathedral for special events. The screen descended silently from above the altar, and suddenly Mark's history was displayed for all to see. Documents, photographs, testimonials from previous affairs, financial records showing his mounting gambling debts. Mark's face drained of color as he watched his carefully constructed facade crumble in real time. Gasps and murmurs spread through the remaining guests. You can't, he stammered. Everything there is documented and verified, I informed him. I've also taken the liberty of sharing this information with your professional licensing board. They were particularly interested in your undisclosed conflicts of interest. Mark's breathing quickened, panic evident in his eyes as he scanned the room, seeing the disgust and shock on the faces surrounding him. His professional reputation, his standing in the community, everything he'd worked for, disintegrating before him. Rebecca pushed through the crowd, reaching him just as he staggered backward. "What is this?" she demanded, looking at the screen, then at me. "What have you done?" "Provided the truth," I answered simply. "Something in short supply recently." Rebecca's sister approached cautiously, her expression stricken as she read the details displayed so publicly. "Rebecca," she whispered, "did you know about all this?" Before Rebecca could answer, I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, extending it toward her. "Divorce papers," I explained calmly. "My lawyer will contact yours, though I should mention that our prenuptial agreement has specific clauses regarding infidelity and financial misconduct." Rebecca's hands shook as she took the envelope. "You can't seriously think you'll get custody," she hissed, keeping her voice low. "No judge would—" "I have recordings of you planning to take our daughter across state lines without my consent," I whispered back. "Documentation of funds you diverted from her future. Witness statements about your attempts to portray me as mentally unstable. Would you like me to continue this inventory publicly, or should we maintain some dignity for Lily's sake?" Rebecca's face crumpled, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Her parents approached cautiously, her mother's expression a mixture of embarrassment and dismay. "What's happening, Rebecca?" her father asked. "These things they're saying about Mark—" "Are all true," Mark interjected bitterly, already backing toward the exit. "And your daughter knew everything. Ask her about the money, the hotels, the plans to leave the state." Rebecca whirled on him. "Mark, don't you dare—" But he was already pushing through the doors, fleeing the scene of his humiliation without a backward glance. I watched Rebecca's family absorb this final betrayal, saw the moment her mother realized the extent of her daughter's deception. The older woman's shoulders sagged, her hand seeking her husband's for support. "You have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings from the house," I informed Rebecca quietly. "Anything related to Lily stays. My lawyer will be present during the removal of your items." With that, I turned away, approaching my mother who held Lily protectively against her shoulder. Taking my daughter into my arms, I joined the remaining guests heading toward the parish hall, leaving Rebecca standing alone in the emptying cathedral. Later, as family and friends celebrated Lily's baptism with champagne and cake, I stood slightly apart, my daughter sleeping peacefully in my arms. My grandfather approached, resting a weathered hand on my shoulder. "You did what was necessary," he said simply. "Your father would be proud?" I nodded, feeling neither triumph nor joy, just a profound relief that the worst was over. Lily would be protected, her future secured, the tangle of lies and betrayal exposed to the light where it could no longer thrive in darkness. When I returned home that evening, the house was silent. Rebecca had already removed some clothing and personal items, though she herself was nowhere to be seen. I placed Lily in her crib, then moved methodically through the rooms, changing locks, securing financial documents, reclaiming the space that had once been filled with love and now echoed with absence. The doorbell rang at exactly noon the next day. Through the security camera, I saw Rebecca standing on our porch, former porch, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, She'd exchanged her usual polished appearance for jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a careless ponytail. I opened the door but remained in the threshold, blocking entry. "James," she began, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk." "You should coordinate with the lawyer," I replied. "He'll be here in an hour to supervise while you gather your belongings." "Please," she implored. "5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, allowing her into the foyer, but no further. The familiar scent of her perfume, once intoxicating, now seemed cloying and artificial, turning my stomach slightly. "I've made a terrible mistake," she said immediately. "Mark manipulated me. He caught me at a vulnerable time when you were so busy with work, and I was struggling with postpartum depression, so—" "Stop," I interrupted. "I'm not interested in revisionist history. You made choices, repeatedly, deliberately, cruelly. Own them, at least." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know, you're right. I don't want to lose my family. Lily needs her mother." "She'll have her mother, according to the custody arrangement my lawyer has prepared. Supervised visitation initially, then gradually increasing as you demonstrate stability and commitment." "Supervised?" Rebecca gasped. "Like I'm some kind of person who was planning to remove a child from her father's life?" I finished for her. "Yes, exactly like that." Before she could respond, my phone buzzed with a notification. The security system showed Mark's car pulling into the driveway. "Reinforcements?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Rebecca glanced toward the door nervously. "I didn't ask him to come, I swear." Mark's insistent knocking echoed through the house. When neither of us moved to answer, his voice carried through the door. "Rebecca, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I crossed to the entryway, engaging the intercom system. "You're trespassing, Mark. Leave now or I'll call the police." "Just 5 minutes," he pleaded, his voice crackling through the speaker. "Everything's falling apart. The firm has suspended me pending investigation. My landlord received anonymous information about my gambling and is terminating my lease. I've lost the Boston contract. I need—" "None of that is my concern," I replied coldly. "And if you're looking to Rebecca for financial support, I should mention that her access to our joint assets has been frozen pending legal proceedings." A choked sound came from behind me. I turned to see Rebecca sinking onto the stairs, face buried in her hands. "You've ruined us," she whispered. "Completely destroyed us." "No," I corrected. "You did that all on your own. I just ensured you couldn't destroy me and Lily in the process." Mark continued pounding on the door, his desperation increasing. "Rebecca, we need to stick together on this. You know things about the Carter family, too. We could still—" I disconnected the intercom and reached for my phone. "I'm calling the police now." "Wait," Rebecca said quickly. "Let me talk to him. I'll make him leave." I considered her request, then nodded curtly. 2 minutes, then he goes or the police come." She opened the door just enough to slip outside, closing it behind her. Through the security camera, I watched their heated exchange. Rebecca gesturing frantically, Mark grabbing her arm, her pulling away sharply. Their voices rose and fell, fragments of accusations and recriminations drifting through the door. When Rebecca returned inside, her expression was resigned. "He's leaving. He wanted—" She paused, then continued flatly. "He thought we might have leverage against you, something we could use to negotiate a better settlement." "And what did you tell him?" "That it's over, all of it." She looked up at me, something like the old Rebecca briefly visible beneath the tear-stained facade. "I won't fight you on the divorce terms. Whatever you think is fair for Lily, I'll accept. Just, please don't keep her from me entirely." I studied her, searching for manipulation and finding only defeat. "The lawyer will be here at 1. You can take personal clothing and items today. Anything else will need to be inventoried and approved." She nodded, then asked softly, "Can I see her?" "Before I go?" I hesitated, then relented. "She's napping. 5 minutes, and I'll be present the entire time." Rebecca followed me upstairs to the nursery, where Lily slept peacefully in her crib. As Rebecca approached, I noticed her hands trembling. She reached out, gently stroking Lily's cheek with one finger. "She looks more like you every day," she whispered. "Those eyes, that determined little chin." I remained silent, watching this woman who had been my wife, the mother of my child, now essentially a stranger to me. "I'll be a better mother than wife," she promised suddenly, not looking at me. "I know you don't believe that now, but I will be. She deserves that much." When the lawyer arrived, Rebecca cooperated fully, moving efficiently through the house, collecting only basic necessities. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "I am sorry, James. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. You didn't deserve any of this." I acknowledged her apology with a nod, but offered no forgiveness. Some betrayals cut too deep for simple absolution. After she left, I walked through the house, feeling its emptiness, the echoes of what had once been. In Lily's room, I stood watching my daughter sleep, marveling at her perfect innocence, her complete trust in a world she had only just begun to experience. "It's just us now, little one," I whispered. "But we'll be okay." That evening, as if sensing the seismic shift in her world, Lily was unusually fussy. I walked the floors with her, singing lullabies my mother had once sung to me, fixing bottles, changing diapers, doing all the little tasks that marked the rhythm of a life with an infant. Around midnight, my phone rang, Rebecca's number appearing on the screen. I declined the call, then another, then a third. Finally, a text message appeared. "Please, James, Mark is drunk, threatening to come to the house. I'm scared. He keeps saying he's going to make you pay for what you did." I stared at the message, debating whether this was another manipulation. Then another text came through, a photo showing Mark, clearly intoxicated, holding what appeared to be a baseball bat, with the caption, "Coming for Carter." I immediately called the police, forwarding them the evidence, then activated the home security system's highest alert level. After ensuring all doors and windows were secured, I settled in Lily's room, prepared to protect her from whatever might come. The police called an hour later to report they'd picked up Mark wandering the neighborhood, intoxicated and belligerent, but unarmed. He was being held overnight for public intoxication and making threats. I declined to press further charges, wanting only to close this chapter as quickly as possible. When morning came, bringing with it pale winter sunlight, I checked my phone to find a final message from Rebecca. "I'm moving back to my parents' house in Oregon until the divorce is finalized. I won't contest your terms. Just please, when you're ready, let me be part of Lily's life again. Goodbye, James." I set the phone aside, feeling a complicated mixture of relief, sadness, and lingering anger. The woman I had loved, the future I had planned, the family I had imagined, all transformed into something unrecognizable by betrayal and its aftermath. Lily stirred in her crib, making the soft, cooing sounds that signaled she was awake and content. I lifted her into my arms, her solid weight an anchor in a world suddenly adrift. "Good morning, sunshine," I murmured against her downy head. "It's a new day." 1 year later. Sunlight streamed through the windows of our new home, catching the dust motes dancing in the air and turning them to gold. Lily's laughter echoed through the rooms as she toddled after her cousin, both children shrieking with delight at some private game. "She's getting so fast," my sister commented, watching the children play. "Hard to believe she's walking already." I nodded, pride swelling in my chest as I watched my daughter navigate the world with growing confidence. At 15 months, she was full of curiosity and determination, exploring everything with tiny, persistent hands and a stubborn independence that reminded me painfully of myself. "The judge made the right decision," my mother said softly, joining us at the window. "Anyone can see she's thriving with you." The custody battle had been mercifully brief. Rebecca, true to her word, had accepted the terms of the divorce without contest. The visitation schedule had evolved over the months from strictly supervised visits to occasional weekends, as Rebecca demonstrated consistent commitment to rebuilding her relationship with our daughter. I scrolled absently through my phone, pausing at a notification from a social media platform I rarely used. Rebecca had posted photos of the small apartment she now rented, the part-time job she'd taken at a local gallery, the therapy sessions she mentioned attending. Her life looked modest, stripped of the luxury and status she'd once prioritized. "Any news about Mark?" my sister asked, noticing my attention on the phone. I shook my head. Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona, trying to rebuild his practice under a different name. The licensing board censured him but didn't revoke his credentials. "Some people never really face consequences," she remarked. "He lost everything that mattered to him," I replied, surprising myself with the lack of bitterness in my voice. "His reputation, his standing in the community, money he can make anywhere, but respect, once lost, is nearly impossible to regain." My grandfather had insisted on hosting Lily's first birthday celebration at his estate, gathering family from across the country for the occasion. Looking around at the assembled relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, I felt a profound gratitude for the support system that had carried me through the darkest period of my life. "James," my grandfather called from across the room, "come meet Eleanor's new colleague. She's just joined the pediatric department at the hospital." I made my way through the crowd, Lily on my hip, to where my grandfather stood with a woman I didn't recognize. She was around my age, with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile that immediately put me at ease. "Dr. Carter, this is Dr. Claire Bennett," my grandfather introduced us. "Claire, my grandson James, and his daughter Lily." "It's just James," I corrected gently, extending my hand. "The only doctor in this conversation is Dr. Bennett." "Claire, please," she replied, her handshake firm and confident. She smiled at Lily, who was studying her with solemn curiosity. "Hello there, birthday girl. That's quite a party you've got going." To my surprise, Lily reached out toward Claire, a rare gesture of trust toward a stranger. Claire accepted her easily, settling the toddler on her own hip with the practiced comfort of someone used to children. "Eleanor tells me you're a brilliant architect," Claire said conversationally. "I just bought a house that needs significant work. Maybe you could recommend someone." "I might know a few people," I replied, finding myself smiling. "Including myself if the project is interesting enough." Our conversation flowed easily, touching on architecture, medicine, our shared love of hiking. Claire had recently moved from Chicago after a divorce, seeking a fresh start in a new city. There was no flirtation, no pressure, just the easy exchange of two people finding unexpected common ground. When Lily began to fuss, Claire handed her back with a smile. "I should probably mingle a bit more before your grandfather decides I'm being rude to the other guests. But it was really nice meeting you both." "You too," I replied, meaning it. Later, as family members began departing, my mother approached with a knowing look. "Claire seems lovely." "Mom," I warned, "don't start." She held up her hands in surrender. "I'm just observing. She's good with Lily. That's important." I couldn't argue with that. In the year since the divorce, I'd had no interest in dating, focusing entirely on Lily and rebuilding our life together. The idea of trusting someone again seemed remote, almost impossible. Yet something about Claire's straightforward manner, the way she'd engaged with Lily without trying to force a connection, had resonated. "Maybe in time," I conceded, surprising myself. As the last guests departed and the house quieted, I carried a sleepy Lily up to her room. The nursery in our new home was painted a soft yellow, filled with books and toys and all the trappings of a beloved child. I settled into the rocking chair, holding her close as she drifted toward sleep. "Happy birthday, little love," I whispered. "You've had quite a year." We both had. The pain of betrayal had dulled, replaced by a cautious optimism about the future. Rebecca was finding her way back to being the mother Lily deserved. I was learning to balance work and fatherhood without sacrificing either. And perhaps someday there might be room in our lives for someone new. Someone who understood that Lily would always come first. The trust, once broken, was rebuilt slowly, carefully. For now, though, this was enough. This quiet moment, this sleeping child, this peaceful home we'd created together. In the gentle rhythm of the rocking chair, I made a silent promise to my daughter. Not that life would be perfect or pain-free, no parent could honestly promise that, but that she would always be cherished, always protected, always secure in the knowledge that she was loved. "We're going to be just fine," I whispered, believing it completely for the first time. Lily sighed in her sleep. One small hand curled trustingly around my finger. Outside, the day was ending, the sunset painting the sky in shades of promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new beginnings, and we would face them together, this tiny family of two, stronger for having weathered the storm.